And welcome to this seminar on the Viva Voce, the oral exam, which is used by many universities around the world as part of the doctoral examination process. A few weeks ago, we had a seminar on the oral exam in which we heard from people who actually research the use of an oral assessment as part of the doctoral examination process. And we learned a lot of really useful things from them around having a strong chair who can manage any potential conflicts in the room, having a good preparation as supervisors of your students and having regular conversations with them all the way through their studies about the oral exam, about the many benefits of an oral exam, whereby the student gets to have a conversation with the examiners and often sort out any misunderstandings of the reading of the text by the examiners or the student's misunderstanding of the examiner's comments, and as an opportunity to welcome the student as a recognized member of the field. We also heard some of the downsides of the enormous tension that many students feel around this and some of the things that can go wrong. As we know, the National Review of the Doctorates in South Africa indicated, the report indicated that there was a sense that including an oral exam really was part of best practice of doctoral assessment. And there was an urging that all universities should introduce the oral exam. So I suspect that many of us feel like this is something that's coming. And so we may as well try and make sense of it for ourselves before it perhaps gets legislated onto us. What was really interesting to me was to note that only a couple of the public institutions offer have the oral exam as a routine part of doctoral examination, but all of the privates that offer doctoral studies have the oral exam, which is, this idea that this is part of best practice and they all use it. So it's really lovely to have with us today Dr. Nisha Singh, who's head of research at Mancosa, and she will be talking about how the oral exam is used in Mancosa. And we also have with us today Eden Day, who is from the University of Bath. Now, I've had the enormous pleasure of doing a number of online oral exams, and a couple of them have been through the University of Bath. And I was particularly impressed by the very streamlined and efficient way in which it was organized. And so I've asked Eden to come along and share some of her expertise. So if you are interested in finding out more of the why we should have oral exams and how you prepare your students, I recommend that you watch the video from that previous session. If you weren't with us, I will pop it in the chat, the link in the chat bar. But today is very much about the nuts and bolts. If we're going to move in this direction, what do we need to think about in terms of policies, in terms of the actual logistics? There are all sorts of considerations that I think we shouldn't just wander in blindly. We should prepare ourselves. Things like making sure that people have a suitable connection, trialing that the day before, introducing the examiners to the chair. Sometimes the chair is one of the examiners, making sure that they've all kind of met each other before time, having clear guidelines, and so on and so forth. So it really is my great pleasure to introduce Nisha and Eden to you today, and they're going to share some of their experiences of managing the oral exam process. I apologize for not turning on my video, but as you can probably hear from my voice, I am suddenly having all sorts of flu symptoms, and so I thought it would be in your best interest not to see me snuffling my way through this session. But I am hoping that Nisha and Eden will be able to turn on their cameras. I've asked each of them to chat for, well, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. however long they need. And as soon as they have both presented their insights from their own experiences, we can open this session up to questions. So over to you, Nisha. Can I ask you to kick us off?
Thank you so much, Professor McKenna. It's wonderful to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I think there might be a little bit of overlap from what you previously had in those presentations, because I'm giving a little bit of a backdrop of the Mancosa doctoral program and what we do in preparing the students, which I thought may have been covered at the last time. Apologies, I did not attend the last meeting, so I will be looking at the video to also enhance what I know thus far and better prepare our mechanisms accordingly. So yes, I hope I'm not going to overstep the mark. I made quite a few slides and I'm asking permission to share, please. I think during the presentation, I'll switch off my camera just so that the connectivity is as best uninterrupted, okay? So I'm going to share,
Good idea.
and then I think I have mine open. Yeah, okay, it's not sharing, I suppose. Here we go. Okay, and then I'm going to put that off. And this here, and then into slide mode. Okay.
Perfect.
So yeah, so Viva Voce Seminar 2. Thank you very much, everybody, for your kind attention. And then, of course, the title slide, logistics and policies and logistics pertaining to online vivas. So I thought I'd start off with a little bit of a backdrop of the Mancosa DBAs. At Mancosa, we only offer thus far a Doctor of Business Administration degree program. So as the name would suggest, often people align a DBA to a professional qualification, with that meaning that 60% being coursework and 40% research, but not the case at Mancosa. It is a full research degree. There is no coursework and there are no formal assessments that contribute directly to the pass or fail at the end of the examination, at the end of the research, I beg your pardon. So yes, we do have progress reporting and we do assess students from time to time with regard to their research development, but not as formal assessments. I thought it was important to bring you the backdrop of the program being a full research one. We are a private higher education institution, and that being, we are a distance provider. There are no contact lessons, and there are, well, so to speak, as per public universities in South Africa. And there are no campus-based contacts like how one would have with a supervisor in an office here on campus, not so. We do, by and large, distance learning, and therefore online mechanism is by and large our modus operandi. We also adopt what is known as the cohort model, which means as opposed to having students register individually and have their studies on an individual or perhaps a little group in a research group, we have a distinctive cohort model, which means all the doctors or all the Doctor of Business Administration students who register for 2024 will continue as a group, especially during the Doctoral Research Academy, which is a 2-year weekend research workshop program. Okay. And there we have, of course, we still have the master apprentice model where we, each student is also aligned a supervisor. And of course, the student supervisor work and the supervision, the mentorship and the training goes on as they would plan, but also off campus. Yes, there are spaces here in the learning centers where they could use dedicated space, but most most of our students are employed, so they have to make time for their studies after hours. Coming back on this and reflecting on my own experience in my PhD, when I was always seeking for information on the doctoral exam procedure and formalities, and always calling them the college office asking for what's the next step and etc., pestering my supervisor all the time. We then decided to include a master class on the thesis examinations for our students in their cohort towards the end of the program, to enlighten them about everything. And as you said earlier, Prof, about the advantages of the oral exam, and of course, the requirements of the exam per se, from the intention to submit, sorry, I should have written it out in full, but from the intention to submit to moderation of the thesis, to external moderation, and of course, to the oral defense, which is by and large very new to our students when it comes to the exams process, because largely they have been writing formal exams up to this stage, and also a mini dissertation up to this stage. So the formalities of research is progressed and facilitated throughout the 2-year research facilitation program. But okay, this talk's not about that, so I'm going to focus more on the oral defense. So, I already said this, what is the reason for an intention to submit? Remember, when you come from the formal or the coursework model, you don't really know what it is to submit an intention to submit. So we go through all these processes with our students. We also tell them what are their requirements and what are the supervisor requirements. And there are lists of those, there are quite a few things. For example, they also have to have a publication, which is either published in press or submitted as part of the examination requirements. The moderation, what happens here? What are the timelines? Because students are always wanting to know, when am I going to get some feedback? So we prepare them so as to reduce their anxiety. One of our goals at Mancosa is student-centric empowerment. So we always make sure that the student comes first in our ethos and in the way we deliver accordingly. We explain to them the external examination and of course that being the exam itself, and of course the oral defense. Things that we also include and talk about are the disagreement about amongst examiners, which could happen, why the reason for a fourth examiner, because normally there are 3, and then the daunting part about re-examination, if that ever has to happen as well. There are provisions for that. And of course, everything that I'm saying here is enshrined in our policy on doctoral examinations. Then, of course, we go into a full presentation about the oral defense. So we take them through steps in preparation. We have something that's called pastoral care at Mancosa, because normally after 2 years, students are still not ready to submit, definitely. So we give them also refresher courses as they approach to near submission time. And it makes so much easier for them to be refreshed on something that has already been explained to them. So yeah, we tell them that, of course, the first thing is to keep calm. Not that they do, but at least they know it is regarded. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. We tell them that, of course, the student, I've just snapshot here on this slide. If you can see it, it's still showing pretty much the same, and a whole lot of caps on the side, telling you what I have extracted from our policy. So a student shall defend his or her thesis, the oral examination of who they shall consist of, and of course, we also invite doctoral students and academic staff to attend. Okay. I think I missed a slide, but maybe it's still coming. Good outcome. Okay, so in the event of a good outcome, meaning that all things were favorable, then the coordinating examiner should then write up the coordinating report in the light of the outcome of and the chairperson also writes a concluding oral defense outcome report indicating whether it was a pass or fail or conditional. So we have these mechanisms built into our policy as well. If, of course, it is a conditional pass, this, of course, is what we share with our students as well. And where acceptance of the thesis is conditional on completion of corrections or revisions, these must be done to the satisfaction of the supervisor as well as the doctoral research office manager. So the students are aware. So when we tell them, we also include some advice here. This is a slide I was looking for. We also include some advice on and preparation to help the preparation for our students. We tell them most certainly it is like an open book exam. A copy of your thesis is of course allowed. We tell them to dress neatly, no torn jeans allowed at this affair. However, it is very relaxed. It is not it is not a graduation ceremony. And we, of course, pen and pencil, remain calm and don't be afraid to ask for clarification of a question. We encourage great preparation. We strongly recommend that the student and the supervisor arrange a practice or a mock Viva ahead of the real one. And we also provide a template. And these templates have nice headings along which to shape your presentation. So the student starts off, of course, by making a presentation before we go into deliberations and discussions, or discussions and deliberations. Well, sorry. So what we also explain to the students why the Viva is necessary. Of course, it is about I'm sorry, I'm some parts of my slide are being blocked here by the top. So okay, so we tell them, or we advise them on what sort of questions to prepare over and above the scholarly content of their thesis. Okay, so like, for example, I would say, what aspects of your thesis are you most proud about, to give them a more rounded and a more global view of their work rather than only focus on the methodology, the results, and the discussion, right? Remember, part of the doctoral attributes is for students to be able to communicate their research and their findings to in a verbal format as well. So we asked them to describe your thesis also in one sentence. Things like this to prepare, not as though these questions are asked, but these are things that we tell them to consider for whilst they are preparing that presentation. Reflect on what you have achieved to merit a DBA. Why do you think your study is of that high quality? Clearly outline your main findings, because the students want to talk academia rather than conversational. And how has your work contributed to the body of knowledge? Of course, that being a very, very critical question for a doctoral study any which way. When it comes to the logistics, our policy is called Examination Procedure Manual for Doctoral Degrees. Although we only have one thus far, a second doctoral degree is in planning. It features as item 10.4, the thesis oral examination. And it is scheduled after the examination reports are received from the examiners. After the coordinating examiner report has been written and disseminated, and after the corrections, revisions, edits have been completed and checked. Okay, so that's the positioning of when this defense is scheduled. Very, very happily and very proudly, I must say, similar to Bath University, although I've not had the experience, I have to give credit to our doctoral research office admin staff who have become experts at scheduling the Viva, because at the point of appointing an examiner, attendance at the oral defense is clearly stated with the date to follow. So once the examiner has signed and accepted that appointment letter, he or she is committed to attending the oral defense, of course, as best because they are from different time zones as well. The staff do well to work around their availability as well. So the Viva, although the title says online, it is to an extent in hybrid format. The student, the doctoral and the Mancosa staff, the supervisor, if the supervisor is Durban-based, attend in person. Usually the examiners, the chair, and the doctoral students attend online. Okay. When I say the student up top, I meant the doctoral candidate who's under examination. The other students are from the other cohorts who attend online. An invitation is sent with the relevant details and the program. And I think I have one here that shows you what the invitation looks like and what the program is. Of course, the details of the Zoom link and everything else is up top, and the names of the student and the names of the chairperson is also above the part that above the Zoom link on the program. Okay, so if we look at the program, Prof was mentioning the part about bringing everybody together. So we do have a nice slot where the purpose of the defense is nicely explained, the introduction of the panelists, the briefing of the panelists, and also a nice little greet. And if you are in Durban and at that time, there's a little bit of refreshments as well. So the biography of the student is then read out. The student then presents, and then the question and answer session, which is totally monitored by the chairperson, who is usually a senior academic, okay, in a professorial ranking usually. And then at that point, after there are questions and answers, the students and everybody else are asked to leave the venue. Those online are then put into a waiting room for the final deliberations to be made by the examiner and the DBA coordinating examiner. Okay. Usually I sit in those deliberations as well. After the comments are made, are tabled, and are well discussed, only then, and then there is consensus in the final decision, Only then is everybody else allowed back into the venue or back onto the online platform for the chairperson to announce the final outcome. And of course, the concluding remarks and the vote of thanks. And I must say this, our chairs always inform our students that they are not doctors at that stage, that the title awarded to them at that stage is doctorandus, and they love it as well. So that's a little bit about our program, and I'm happy to answer any questions, because I may have left out some salient points that you would like to add, but I'm not yet finished. So following the deliberations, a second coordinating report in the light of the outcome of the oral examination will be written, where acceptance of the thesis is conditional. Okay, these must be done. I think I mentioned it. These must be done to the satisfaction of the supervisor as well as the doctoral manager. If the corrections and revisions have not been completed within 6 months, the examination will be deemed failed. But of course, in those 6 months, we are in contact with the student to of course, not to do the corrections, but to assist as best we can if required. And then I have some concluding remarks, which I would like to make, please, if there's time. So, okay, so I see there's a few messages, but I'll come back to that. So the Viva Voce, in our view here at Mancosa, serves as a critical tool for upholding academic standards, ensuring integrity and rigor of the doctoral research. And I'll explain it a bit clearer as we move on. I wanted to say also that our students reported improved confidence in articulating their studies, mind you, following the Viva, which of course is critical for their academic and professional success, and of course aligned to graduate attributes. And most importantly for me, now reading a lot on AI and technologies, especially in a distant education environment where we are consistently using online tools as mechanisms of delivery, we believe that the Viva acts as a mechanism for demonstrating the depth of understanding, analytical rigor, and the candidate's personal contribution to the research. Also, as an added layer of scrutiny to safeguard the credibility of our academic qualifications. This is becoming more and more serious now. We're doing a whole project on academic integrity here at Mancosa. And then I suppose you're all very familiar with the CHE, what does it call it? The CHE Doctoral Degrees National Report, which they released in March 2022. And there they clearly recommend that all institutions should implement the oral defense, as long as there are clear guidelines, which we have, and it should be made explicit whether the oral examination precedes or succeeds the examiner, which we do. And the oral defense of the thesis is a good practice that should be encouraged, knowing that it can take place in various formats, and an internal seminar, or a public presentation, which ours is almost near public presentation, to which all examiners are invited. I know it detracts a little from what other institutions do, but I am here sharing with you with what we do at Mancosa. Oh, yes, and that's my last slide. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me a lot extra time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Nisha. And there are quite a few questions in the chat bar, but I'm going to jump straight across to Eden. So if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing your
Yes,
slide.
of course. Yes,
Thank
of
you
course.
so much. And then we'll hopefully take up all the questions at the end.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Nisha, and over to you, Eden.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Singh. That was really interesting. And I love the idea of a masterclass. That is a really excellent idea, and something that I think our doctoral students would really welcome here at the University of Bath. It's really lovely to be here with you all today, albeit virtually. I also have some slides prepared as well. So I will just try and share my screen. And lovely. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Brilliant. Wonderful. I'll probably just pop my camera off just so we have optimum connectivity. As we know, these things are a little bit tricky. So I've mainly focused on the process of sort of our Viva examinations at the University of Bath. So we started to develop our virtual Vivas a lot more during the period of COVID, and the resulting lockdown that came from that. This essentially meant that we needed a more stringent process and to really look at kind of how we were bringing people together for those doctoral examinations. I think what we pride ourselves on here at the University of Bath, and particularly on the DBA in Higher Education Management Programme, is openness in organisation, and we have learned that communication is crucial. So all communications leading up to the Viva should be focused, should be concise, and written in a way that is accessible. We have a very global pool of examiners who contribute to our Vivas. So we need that communication to be accessible for people for example, whose English is a second language, and also for students as well, again, whose English is a second language. So we've tried to develop our communication to kind of enhance that. I've got some success criteria here, and I will also send this PowerPoint to Professor McKenna following the presentation. So if anybody would like a copy, then that's absolutely fine. So what we need is the clear communication of institutional regulations to all parties. For example, our big one, no recording of the Viva assessments. Dates and timings need to be agreed by all parties well in advance of the assessment. So ensuring things like time differences are accounted for. Our program is very diverse, so we're often contending with huge time differences. So that needs to be sort of readily communicated from the outset with everybody on the same page as to when that Viva is actually taking place. We also have tailored reminder emails prior to the assessment to facilitate discussion. It helps us to address any issues. And what we found is that kind of having that sort of consistent communication lends a more collaborative feel to an event in which the participants are not co-located. It gives people an opportunity to start discussing the thesis at an early stage and helps kind of foster a good relationship between the examiners as well. So we are really in the doctoral college at the moment. So I work between the School of Management and the University of Bath and the doctoral college. So it's about promoting the professionalism, making sure that all participants in the Viva recognize that this is a rigorous academic assessment. So we have really focused working with academic staff and professional services staff to ensure we have tailored communications to send at each stage of the organization process. And obviously we'll ensure these are kind of individualized each time, but having a standard communication helps with quality assurance. It also helps with standardization across all the doctoral programs at the University of Bath. So for example, we don't want somebody doing the Doctor of Education program receiving wildly different correspondence to somebody who's on the DBA HEM program. We need all of our doctoral students to be working towards that final rigorous defense of their thesis and to all be kind of working in line with the university regulations. This also helps to ensure that all administrators who are kind of overseeing these examinations are working in line with the regulations and up to date procedures and guidelines. So there's no kind of, you know, using information that's wildly out of date, as long as we're consistently updating those comms. So I've given a little overview of our process at the University of Bath. So we started to really look at this, as I said, kind of during that period of lockdown. How do we make this a stringent, focused assessment with the best experience offered to the student that we possibly can when the Viva is held online? So it's really important that we start off with thesis submission guidance sent out to the student when they give us their intention to submit. So we communicate to all students who are reaching kind of the end of their studies that they should contact us with intention to submit 2 months prior to submission. This essentially allows us to provide them with the up-to-date guidance, to discuss with them, you know, are they going to travel to us for their Viva, or will it be held online? And to ensure that all kind of paperwork, any outstanding academic integrity tests or ethics reviews are all complete before we come to appointing the examiners. So from then, the appointment of examiners is the responsibility of our lead supervisor. So that's the student's lead supervisor, and they're sent a form by the administration office to complete, which is supposed to evidence the legitimacy of choice of examiners. So the student, it's really important that the student does not have any involvement in this process. The examiners cannot be individuals who the student has worked with or may have any sort of prior relationship with. And we really need to know that the examiners chosen are able to conduct a doctoral examination so that they have the qualifications necessary for this. For example, all of our examiners at the University of Bath must hold a PhD or a DBA. Following this, the form with the appointment of examiners is sent off to the Doctoral Board of Studies for approval. So this essentially helps with that quality assurance. It ensures examiners are fully considered by kind of a more a party that's a little bit more removed from the situation, which gives kind of an unbiased view. Are these examiners suitable, and does their research kind of align with that of the student, to give the student the best chance of succeeding in that Viva? So point 4, we have a plagiarism check conducted on all of our thesis. We use a form of software called Our Original when the students submit to Moodle. And this scans the theses for any sort of plagiarism issues, which again helps with that quality assurance, makes sure that the student has submitted something that is original, it's their own work. We can see that the research has been done by them, and it helps reassure the examiners that they're working with a legitimate and well-founded thesis. We like to encourage early communication between the examiners because they are not co-located. We always have one internal examiner who's a member of staff at the university and a member of staff who is external. Our pool of external examiners is extremely diverse, and they could be located all across the globe. And we like to, at this stage, with the proposal of Viva dates to all parties, as well as kind of the guidelines, the university regulations being sent out to them, that we encourage them to start a conversation about the Viva itself, about the thesis, and this must be done 6 weeks prior to the Viva, so that we have enough time in which to send the thesis out individually to the internal and external examiners. This also helps our examiners to manage their workloads, where we're working with incredibly busy academic professionals. So we know that they need sort of a good length of time in which to conduct that thorough examination of the thesis. At this stage, it's the paperwork as well, the bit that everybody loves. So we have our preliminary report sent out, which basically allow the examiners to lay out their initial thoughts on the thesis prior to the Viva itself, alongside the copy of the examiner's report, just so that they can sense check this. Then they know what's going to be asked of them to report on during the examination, and it's not kind of a surprise when we get to that stage. So throughout that lead up then, within that 6-week kind of window, we send our summary of Viva arrangements to all parties, dates, timings, time differences, all accounted for, and the MS Teams or Zoom meetings created. So we like to use platforms that are universally accessible. Everybody usually knows what they are, how to use them, no surprises with those. The reminders as well are key because it gives us a chance to kind of troubleshoot, to address any issues or concerns. And it also gives people a chance to ask questions, which we really welcome. We would prefer people to ask questions and know exactly what they're doing on the day, rather than getting to the day before and feeling like they haven't had the opportunity to have those discussions. So 2 weeks prior to the Viva test call, I'll get to that in a minute, we have a reminder email of arrangements as well as a reminder of the paperwork. So just in case we've had an email that has floated off into cyberspace, we make sure those reports are sent out again, just to be extra sure that everybody has a copy. Our deadline for the submission of the preliminary report with those initial thoughts on the thesis from both examiners is 1 week prior. So these reports are then exchanged between the internal and external examiner. This means that they can kind of get a good idea of the initial thoughts, any sort of major concerns with the research that's been conducted, and also it gives them a chance to think of questions that they may wish to ask in the Viva when the student is defending their thesis. This is kind of the last leg, which is sort of the more anxiety-driven part for the students. So we try to diminish that with the opportunity to troubleshoot in good time. So we actually hold a Viva test call 2 days prior to the Viva, so 48 hours, which is a really good opportunity to address technical difficulties. We ask that all participants can see and hear one another. And this allows us to troubleshoot at a time that will not directly impact on the student's assessment and isn't a time of high stress. We feel like 2 days before gives us the opportunity to maybe, if there's a sort of significant IT issue, we can look at that as the administrators and maybe also flag it with our director of studies. Then the big day, we have the pre-Viva examiners meeting. So it's 1 hour prior to the Viva to discuss the thesis. And we feel this is a really important point for the examiners to both meet sort of more formally and to sort of get those initial findings of the thesis discussed. And then this is followed by the Viva. We ask that following the Viva, the examiner's report must be submitted within 2 weeks of the Viva. This allows us to basically provide the student with a clear idea of when they're going to get any notification of their corrections. It allows the student to manage their expectations as well, to know that due to sort of workloads of the examiners, they may be waiting for this to be sort of formally sent to us. So it sort of reduces that anxiety a little bit as well. We also think it's really important that we take care of our examiners. So we make sure that we look at ensuring that they've got their expenses paid for. We have tried to tackle the technical issues. We've mitigated these as much as possible. Like I said, holding the test call 48 hours prior to the assessment basically gives us that extra time to address technical and accessibility issues in a controlled manner. Using reliable platforms and having that clear contingency plan, because we can't control everything. for when technical troubles occur. So moving the Viva from one platform to another, we'll often have both Teams and Zoom invitations created so that we can kind of flip from one to the other if there's a major problem. And then a contingency plan must be included in the assessment guidance, which is passed to all attendees in advance of the Viva. So basically, if there is a major sort of power shortage or something along those lines, then we would be looking to rearrange, and we make sure that all parties are aware of that and what kind of to expect in the event of that eventuality that absolutely none of us want. So we have, as I said, a very diverse and global pool of examiners. We have really positive relationships with our examiners, and we cannot thank them enough for the massive amounts of work that they do for us in supporting our doctoral students through to sort of, well, basically becoming doctors and graduation. So we ensure all expenses for examiners processed in a timely manner, all guidance for payment paperwork passed to examiners prior to the Viva. So everyone knows exactly what to expect when they're getting paid for their super hard work. And also along with that, making sure that bringing in sort of external examiners working with your institution are aware of key regulations and any anything that's sort of individual about the way you run your Viva process, so that there's no kind of surprises when they come to examining a thesis. We always try to manage our expectations from the outset, so ensure examiners have a clear idea of their responsibilities, so when they should be submitting paperwork, what the time frame for their work on the Viva is. For example, if a student is issued the outcome of a revised thesis, then they will be required to kind of meet 12 months following the initial Viva to maybe examine a second Viva, or to sort of meet with the student and the internal examiner and discuss that as well. I've included some useful links and also our Viva information from the University of Bath here as well. It gives a sort of more stringent overview of our process, guidelines for research examiners, QA7 degrees. So if I pass this to Professor McKenna, she can circulate it and you can check that out for yourselves. It's pretty well-developed guidance. And I know that sort of a lot of trial and error went into this sort of pre-COVID. And I think we're really in a position now where the Vivas sort of run very smoothly and we very, very rarely have issues, which is really lovely. I have a slide that says any questions, but just ignore that because I'm going to pass you back to Sue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Eden.
No problem.
Really useful practical advice there. And my experience, as I say, I have done, I've been very lucky to have the experience of doing oral exams at a number of universities. It's in a way, it's quite sad that we no longer get flown to do them in person, but I've had experience of a number of different universities, and my experience at University of Bath was just particularly smooth, and I did feel that I was being taken care of, which so when you said, we take care of our examiners, I thought, yes, that's right. I really had the sense that people were grateful for my time and they really wanted to make sure that it all went smoothly. So we appreciate your input and appreciate those links. We will, the lovely Shiloh, who is on the call as well, will make sure that everyone who's on this, who's in this session gets both the recording and the slides with those links. I wonder if Nisha and Eden want to have a look in the chat. There are some questions for you. And while you are having a look at those, and you're welcome to pick up on any of them, I'm going to ask anyone else in the room who might want to just put up their hand and ask a question if you've got any burning issues. There we go. Jody, let's hear from you first. Jody, do you want to unmute and ask us your question?
Hi, sorry, it wasn't allowing me to unmute. Hello, my name is Jody. I'm from the University of Cape Town. And I've got a few questions, but this is just something that the University of Cape Town has also been piloting, and we have come across quite a few logistical issues as we've been going along. And one of it, and I think this is more directed to Eden, but I note that you said that you distribute the thesis and you guys have already scheduled the oral exam. Has there been a case where you get where reports are submitted late, or you have to reschedule the Viva? Because I think that is something that we were quite concerned about as well.
Yeah, thank you. We've actually only had, in my time anyway, I only started this post in January. We've had one instance of an external examiner who had a really heavy workload, and it came sort of the week before the Viva, and their preliminary report just wasn't ready. So in that situation, we liaise with the director of studies and also the student's lead supervisor to see what would be in the best interest of the student. And in this case, we decided rescheduling for sort of 2 weeks later would be the best outcome for the student, to make sure that their sort of thesis had been kind of read by the external examiner, had been thoroughly considered, and it just gave the best chance of kind of holding like a positive examination. But that is the only instance. I don't think I've had any late paperwork other than that. And to be honest, they did actually flag it with us when they sort of knew that they weren't going to be able to provide a cohesive report.
Thank you.
No
And then
problem.
can I also just ask, because I'm not sure if I missed it, but how many external examiners do you guys make use of?
Oh, I will try to pass Shiloh an exact figure. I think at the
sorry, I meant for
okay.
for the Viva. Sorry,
I think at the for the Viva itself, we have an internal examiner and an external examiner. So just the two, and sometimes we also have an independent chairperson. We ask that the lead supervisor is also present, but they are not allowed to contribute to the Viva itself, because obviously they're very close to that work. They're basically just there so that they can hear the result at the end, which is a long old time for them. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Eden. Yeah, it's very much the norm in the UK to just have two examiners, one internal and one external. In South Africa, we are expected to have 3 examiners. The literature suggests that's actually a good idea. The literature suggests a good idea because, if you've got 2 people with opposing views, if you've got 3, it's unlikely to get 3 opposing views.
Yeah.
But it does mean that we have to hunt more for more examiners. Also, that all our examiners are external. We are advised not to have internal. So it's interesting that the South African doctoral examination process is actually much tougher in that sense
definitely
than the UK. Nisha, I wonder if you want to add anything on that point.
I wanted to speak to Jody, because I think there's something she's asking me, the difference between ask about the difference.
Oh, yes,
the chair. So the chair is an external who has only been adjudicating the proceedings of the oral defense. Okay, he or she has not had any engagement with the thesis or the examiner reports. However, the coordinating examiner, who is an internal academic, has had engagement with the examiner reports, and thereby writes a coordinating examiner report to also pass the decision on the outcome of the first level of examination. So at Mancosa, we have the oral defense after the formal examination. And of course, there can be a lot of discussion around this. Then what is the purpose of having the oral when the results already known? However, we've built it into our policy that if the examiners still require clarification, improvements, corrections, then this too has to be done. So it's very, very much an added layer of quality assurance. But the other point I wanted to make was answering to that we also had to have one oral defense rescheduled. And that was because one examiner was unable to attend for reasons beyond his or her control. And fortunately, the student was highly stressed, was absolutely needed to be pacified about that, but then regrouped, reassessed the situation, and then agreed to a rescheduling. And fortunately, after the student was counseled into, returning for a second round, all went very amicably. And we have these problems about meeting graduation deadlines, and that was also becomes quite a logistical nightmare to challenge when the situation is tight, as was in this case. Finally, I'm going to say we also have all those mechanisms about the examination processes from the ITS all the way to the Turnitin reporting and the items that Eden very nicely explained also here, but I didn't talk about those because I went directly and took a nosedive into the oral defense. However, safe to say that we have exactly the same processes, as well as the formalization of the appointment of examiners, which goes through a committee approval before they are awarded the appointment letter. So thank you for allowing my input there.
Thank you. There's a question that I'm going to pick up on the chat bar, and it's around. Oh, I see Eden's already replied to it. One of the things that came up in the last seminar was this distinction between the idea of a public Viva, which is very much celebratory, very common in the Scandinavian countries, common in many European countries, where the Viva is actually the graduation ceremony. So it's very much open to the public, and it's a celebration of the doctorate rather than an opportunity to assess the doctorate. And then the issue of where it is an examination, where there is the potential for more work to be done, even, heavens forbid, the potential for the student to fail. The idea was that that should be a private oral exam if it's being set up as a space very much of assessment with potential range of consequences. Then the thinking is that should be private. I thought that was quite a useful distinction that was made last week. But Eden, I see you've made the comment, which was certainly my experience of examining in the UK, was that we've already kind of we've both examiners have read the thesis, we've communicated with each other, we have a very clear understanding of what we think the strengths and weaknesses of the thesis are, and we even agree on what it is that we want to interrogate in the oral exam. Do you ever have a case, I'm wondering, where the examiners say, we can't have an oral exam yet because this thesis actually needs extensive work to be done? Would that ever happen?
I know that Jacqueline actually had this experience, again, only once, which is really good to hear, where the examiners felt that actually, basically, they knew before the Viva took place that they would be looking at giving the student a revised outcome, which would mean that the student would have 12 months in which to kind of make modifications, make changes to that thesis. And it was sort of a discussion between the examiners, because it's still quite early on in the sort of reviewing process of that thesis, whether it would be pertinent to kind of hold it at a later date. But actually, they decided to go ahead with the Viva just purely for sort of quality assurance purposes, saying, we've already set a date, the student has kind of an expectation that this exam is going to take place. And hilariously enough, in the Viva, the student actually defended their work so well that they came out with sort of 3 months corrections instead. So
Right.
it is strange sometimes to kind of have the thesis. I've spoken to quite a few examiners who've had the thesis in front of them, and it's not until the student has really kind of had the opportunity to defend it and sort of say why they focus on a particular research topic, why they've sort of chosen the statistical evidence they have or anything like that, that they have no idea what the outcome may be.
So I think what you're saying actually echoes something that Carolyn Jackson said in the last seminar, is that sometimes she goes into a Viva expecting to ask for, obviously they've decided that it has the potential to be a doctorate. She wouldn't go into the Viva if it's absolutely disaster, but with the expectation that they would be asking for quite a significant resubmission. And as she said, exactly the same thing. The conversation was so outstanding in the Viva that they then modified their call for changes and said, well, actually you just need to articulate that more strongly in the thesis. It turns out you don't need to redo things. You just need to make clearer why you did things as you did. So that conversation ended up being a space, which it really should be, a collegial space of negotiating the knowledge contribution. And that's where your coordinating examiner or your chair, whoever it is that holds the session, is so important to make sure that that culture is one of, yes, criticality, but also collegiality. I have been involved in a Viva that was one of the examiners, the other examiner was just really nasty, and it felt incredibly uncomfortable. And I thought that a stronger chair would have put that person in their place.
Sometimes it's needed.
Yes, sometimes it is needed. Marcina, if I'm saying your name right, I hope I am.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. My question is about the vivas, obviously. That's the topic. Do you ever have mock vivas at all? And my question stems from the fact that I'm supervising, for example, a master's student at the moment who has the highest levels of anxiety. I just open my mouth and it'll pop a vein. So I'm just wondering, is there a space where these doctoral students could actually practice a Viva? So by the time that they get to it, it's not like so scary that they unable to articulate what they want to say, because sometimes the students know exactly what it is they want to say, but they're just unable to articulate it due to nerves or something like that.
Yeah, it's actually really common for us to host mock Vivas. So this would be the responsibility of the student supervisory teams. They would have 2 supervisors throughout the research stage of the DBA, and their lead supervisor and their second supervisor. Sometimes we also have a third supervisor as well, where we think it's sort of a particular requirement. They would be looking to hold a mock Viva once we'd set a date. So it would be around sort of the 4 to 6 week mark prior to that formal assessment.
Hi, Marcina.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the same at Mancosa. The doctoral team here, there's the coordinators and the supervisor get together and also have some mock defenses at Mancosa as well.
I've actually just put an article in the chat bar, which is by Cortosi, who was one of our speakers in the last seminar, which actually gives a set of questions, which speaks to the point that's just been that's the question that's just been asked now by Marcina, but it also is a question that was asked online by somebody. I've lost it now, about the kinds of questions that get asked. And that article, Erica, that article is a set of questions that they reckon supervisors should be asking their students all the way through, so that students learn. And that was one of the things that was pointed out, is that one of the benefits that Nisha pointed out of having an oral exam is that students learn to develop that graduate attribute of being able to articulate their research verbally. And so Cortosi indicates in that article that this is something we should be doing as supervisors all the way through the supervision process, asking these questions so that students get used to the kinds of questions they will get in their oral exam and develop that capacity to answer them.
So we also
Uh,
provide supervisor training and also upskilling them, and well, not necessarily upskilling them, but advising them as to how we would like them to also better prepare the student. So we have supervisor master classes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the
Mm.
kinds of things that as supervisors we want to start thinking about.
Mm.
And I totally take the point that some of our students are really battle with anxiety and are terrified. One of the things, and I think Eden did refer to that, is that we need to make clear that we're not here to examine their great use of fancy English with a received pronunciation. We're not here to examine their fancy use of, I don't know, software, Zoom. It's very much a conversation about the knowledge contribution. And so that's part of what we need to prepare our examiners to know, is that we are not here to say who's a great public speaker. We are here to say who can have a conversation about their knowledge contribution. So we need to prepare our supervisors and our examiners in this regard. Thank you so much to everyone. Geordie, you got one last question?
I'm so sorry. I apologize
That's
for
fine.
all the questions. Just very, very last thing, because I know that we are concerned about English being the first language for a lot of our students, and we understand that we examine in English. However, has there ever been a case where you've had students that maybe English wasn't their first language, they weren't able to articulate their research as well as what you think they would have for somebody who was maybe more proficient in English?
Our sort of entry requirements to the program in the UK sort of come directly from sort of the UK government and immigration sort of laws that we need to kind of abide by. So our students are all sort of assessed for English language when they join us on the DBA. And any doctoral program, and actually any undergraduate or postgraduate taught program at the university. So it would be highly unlikely that we'd have somebody at that sort of late stage that would be, have language that wasn't to the required standard. Yeah, our entry requirements at the University of Bath in particular are quite high, and for the doctoral programs in particular, it's sort of quite stringently monitored as well as to who we kind of take onto the program.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say,
Yes,
if I may,
sure.
please, sorry to just butt in like this. We always have a technician on site, a trained technician on site from the IT department. That's what I'm saying, not one of us. And we also have never had an IT mishap.
Don't
Everything
say
has
that
always
aloud,
worked all the
Nisha.
time. I'm
Curse
really
yourself.
even during the load sheddings when it was
Wow.
really severe. It's
Yeah.
been very smooth sailing. You see, Mancosa is very set up for distance education, and all these mechanisms were really, really well in place even before the lockdown. So they've just gone into a highly expensive online technologies here. So happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think increasingly all of our students are used to having engagements online, so it's not quite as scary as perhaps it was pre-COVID. Tiny silver linings of that horrible time. I'm sort of edging towards wrapping up just because I see that people are having to leave, and I don't want us to sort of finish off without saying a proper thank you to our speakers today. Thank you so much to both of you for coming along and sharing your expertise and your own personal experiences of managing these processes in your universities. And thank you to everybody else who was with us for this session. Shiloh will be emailing you with the link to where you will be able to find the recording, and we'll include those hyperlinks to those materials that Eden shared with us on her last slide. Thanks, everyone. Keep well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Cheers then. Bye-bye.